"You're dead when we get home," he growled through clenched teeth, gripping her wrist so tight it turned purple. She lowered her gaze, too afraid to speak. But she didn't have to, because at the next table, a man with scars on his knuckles and steel in his eyes had already stood up, and he had heard everything. Amara had learned how to make herself small. She sat across from Malik, barely touching her food, fingers curled into her lap, eyes on the empty glass. His voice was low but sharp, each word a razor tucked behind a smile. To the other diners they looked like any couple, maybe even in love. But Amara's bruised wrist, hidden beneath her long sleeve, told the truth. "You think I didn't see you looking at the waiter?" Malik hissed through clenched teeth. "I wasn't," she whispered, instantly regretting it. His knee bumped the table as he leaned closer. "You weren't what? Huh? Flirting? Trying to make me look weak?" "No," Amara said quickly, voice trembling. "I swear." He smiled. Not kindly. His hand reached across the table, brushing a curl from her cheek, gently, almost lovingly, and then his nails dug into her skin for a second too long. A silent warning. At the next table, an older man stirred his coffee. He looked like he didn't belong. Not because of his tailored black coat or the small scar on his cheek, but because he hadn't looked at a menu once. He just sipped his drink, eyes half-lidded, quiet. But he hadn't missed a word. Dominic Moretti wasn't there for the food. He rarely was. His days of blood and brutality were supposed to be behind him. He'd promised himself that. But when he saw a young black woman shrinking under a man's thumb, her shoulders tight with fear, that old weight returned to his chest. Some violence needed remembering. Malik didn't notice him. Abusers rarely did. They saw victims, not witnesses. He picked up his napkin, tossed it at Amara. "Wipe your face. You look pathetic." She did, hands shaking. And that's when it happened. The waitress came by, smiling. "Can I get you two anything else?" Before Amara could answer, Malik snapped, "We're fine. Mind your damn business." The waitress blinked, taken aback. Dominic spoke without looking up. "She wasn't talking to you." Malik turned slowly. "The hell did you say?" Dominic finally lifted his gaze. Calm, unmoving. "I said she was talking to the lady, not the coward barking at her." A few heads turned. Malik's face flushed. "You don't know who you're talking to, old man." Dominic stood, slowly. He wasn't tall. He wasn't loud. But something in the way he moved, deliberate, sharp, silenced the room. "I do," Dominic said, voice low. "I've met 100 of you. Always loud, always angry, always running your mouth at someone who can't hit back." Malik sneered. "You want to be a hero, huh?" Dominic stepped forward, close enough that only Amara could see the truth in his eyes. The kind that had seen death and delivered it. "No," he said. "Heroes play fair." He leaned in closer, inches from Malik's ear. "I don't." Amara's breath caught in her throat. It was the first time someone had spoken up for her. Not whispered concern behind her back, not cast pitying glances, but actually stood between her and Malik. Malik, for the first time in their toxic relationship, didn't know what to say. He blinked, as if the moment hadn't registered. "I don't care who you think you are," he finally said, puffing his chest like a rooster in a fight he hadn't chosen but now couldn't back out of. "This isn't your business." Dominic didn't blink. "Everything in my line of sight is my business." Malik's laugh came too fast, too loud. He looked around expecting the other patrons to back him up. They didn't. They looked away. They always looked away. Until now. "You want to die over some chick?" Malik scoffed. "Some broke chick who doesn't know when to shut up?" Amara flinched, eyes brimming with tears. Dominic's voice remained even. "Say another word." The threat wasn't shouted. It wasn't theatrical. It didn't need to be. It was a command carved from decades of experience, the kind of tone used when words were rarely repeated. Malik hesitated, then made the worst mistake of his night. He reached for Amara. Fingers closed around her arm, hard, and pulled her halfway across the table. She gasped in pain, trying to twist free. Dominic moved so quickly it didn't register until Malik was off his feet. One hand grabbed the collar of Malik's shirt, the other pressed flat against his chest, and with a force that betrayed years of muscle memory, Dominic slammed him backward into the booth behind them. The room froze. Chairs scraped. Forks dropped. But no one moved. Dominic didn't raise his voice. He didn't make a scene. He simply leaned in and whispered something only Malik could hear. Whatever it was, it drained the color from Malik's face. He sat there, paralyzed. Not by pain, but by realization. This wasn't a random stranger with a temper. This was someone dangerous. Someone who operated in silence. Someone who didn't call the police because he never needed to. Dominic stood tall, adjusted his sleeves, and looked toward the waitress. "Could you get the lady some water, please?" he said. The waitress nodded, her hands shaking. Dominic turned to Amara. "Are you okay?" She nodded slowly, still processing. "Good," he said, "because now you have a choice." "A choice?" she echoed. He motioned toward the restaurant door where Malik still sat frozen in place, breathing shallow, not daring to move. "You can leave with him and hope he never touches you again. Or you can finish your meal and I'll make sure you never see him again." Amara looked at the man who had once controlled her with silence and fists. Then she looked at the stranger who'd silenced him with just a stare. For the first time in a long while, she chose herself. "I'll stay." Dominic nodded once, then sat back down, as if nothing had happened. But everything had. The waitress brought Amara a fresh glass of water, her eyes wide with silent questions. Amara offered a small, shaky smile. Not of thanks, but of apology. She hadn't meant to cause a scene. That's how Malik trained her. Believe that she was always the problem. But for the first time, she didn't apologize aloud. She took a sip of water. Her hands were still trembling. Dominic sat across from her now. Calm. Measured. He didn't speak, didn't demand she explain herself. He just watched. Not in judgment, but with the quiet patience of someone who knew what it meant to live with ghosts. "You hungry?" he finally asked, motioning to her untouched plate. Amara blinked. She couldn't remember the last time someone asked what she wanted. I guess," she said. "Then eat," Dominic said gently. "You're safe now." She picked up her fork. It felt foreign in her hand, like holding a passport to a country she'd only heard about in stories. She took a bite. Then another. Slowly at first, then faster, like her body realized it was allowed to live again. Dominic didn't touch his food. He just sipped his espresso, watching the room like a man who never stopped checking exits. "So," she said between hesitant bites, "are you a cop or something?" He smirked. "Not even close." Amara swallowed. "You don't seem surprised, like you've seen guys like him before." "I've seen worse," he said. "Been worse." She froze. "What do you mean?" Dominic leaned back. His eyes, once cold and unreadable, softened just a touch. "Let's just say, I used to be on the other side of this table. Different life, different city. A lot of blood. That should have scared her. Maybe it did. But it also made sense. Only someone who knew real violence could stop it without breaking a sweat." "You didn't have to help me," she said after a pause. "No," he agreed. "I didn't." "Then why did you?" Dominic looked her in the eye. "Because someone once helped my sister when I didn't. Because I know what regret tastes like. And because when you've hurt as many people as I have, saving one feels like oxygen." Amara stared at him, stunned. The Mafia Boss wasn't just a man of violence. He was a man living with it, carrying it like a shadow, and somehow, today, she'd given him a reason to stand in the light again. "You gonna be okay?" he asked. She nodded slowly. "Yeah, I think I am." Dominic nodded back. "Good, then let's finish lunch." But neither of them noticed Malik. He hadn't left. He hadn't run. He was still there, sitting 3 tables back, watching, eyes burning, jaw clenched, fingers twitching. And hate? Hate wasn't done with him yet. Not by a long shot. Malik sat at the far end of the restaurant, half hidden in the shadow of a pillar, watching with the precision of a hunter who's lost his prey once and refuses to let it happen again. He had always controlled Amara with silence, fear, and isolation. But tonight, something had changed. That old man, whoever he was, had pulled her out of Malik's grasp without lifting a weapon. Just words. Just presence. Malik hated that more than anything. Dominic had exposed him, made him look weak, and in Malik's world, weakness was death. As Amara laughed softly over a second bite of her pie, Malik's fingers twitched on the cracked screen of his phone. He wasn't texting. He was recording. Her smile. Her comfort. Her sitting across from another man like Malik had never existed. The rage burned behind his eyes. Dominic, meanwhile, sensed something. He always did. His gaze swept the restaurant again. No panic, no tension. Just a calm scan, as if he were smelling rain in the air before anyone else saw clouds. When his eyes passed over Malik's booth, Malik stiffened. For a second, Dominic's gaze locked with his. No anger, no fear, just cold awareness. Dominic knew. And worse, he wasn't concerned. That made Malik's stomach twist. He needed control back, and if he couldn't take Amara in front of everyone, he'd take her later. Amara noticed Dominic's eyes darken for just a moment. "You okay?" she asked. He nodded. "We'll be leaving soon." "Is something wrong?" He looked at her with a strange sort of warmth. "Not if you stay close to me." The bill came. Dominic paid without even glancing at it, slipped a generous tip under the plate, and stood. Amara rose with him, tucking her purse under her arm, her steps hesitant but no longer shaky. They walked to the door and passed Malik on the way. He didn't move. He didn't speak. He just watched. Dominic paused. Amara's hand instinctively gripped his coat sleeve. "Let's go," she whispered. But Dominic didn't rush. Instead, he leaned in toward Malik, almost casually. "Walk out that door tonight and never follow her again." Malik's jaw clenched. "Or what?" Dominic didn't answer. He just smiled. The kind of smile that didn't reach the eyes. Then he walked out with Amara, leaving the storm to boil behind them. Outside, the air was cool, fresh. It smelled like rain and pavement and something else Amara couldn't quite name. Freedom. "Do you think he'll come after me?" she asked softly. Dominic was quiet for a moment. Then he turned to her. "If he's smart, no. If he's not..." He reached into his coat pocket, pulling out a card. "Then you call the number on this, and you leave the rest to me." Amara took the card. No name, no business, just a number. It was the safest thing she'd ever held. But inside the diner, Malik's fingers tapped out a message. He wasn't calling the police. He was calling someone worse. Malik stood outside the diner now, lit by the orange hue of a flickering street lamp, phone pressed tight to his ear. "You owe me, Dev." A pause. "No, I'm not asking for permission. I'm calling in the favor." Another pause. "I don't care who he is. I want him gone. Tonight." He hung up. Dev wasn't the kind of man you called unless you were desperate. Malik had helped him once. Years ago, during a messy job gone wrong. Malik saved his skin. Now he expected Dev to return the favor. And Dev? He never asked questions, just took orders and cleaned up the mess. Across town, Amara sat on the edge of a motel bed. The room was modest but clean. Dominic had insisted she not go back to her apartment, not with Malik's pride still bruised. She had protested at first. She didn't want to be a burden, but Dominic simply handed her a room key like it was already hers. "Sleep here tonight," he had said. "You're not hiding, you're healing." Now she sat in the silence of a space where no one was yelling, where no fists hung in the air like shadows. But her hands wouldn't stop shaking. There was a knock at the door. Her heart leapt. She moved slowly, cautiously. "Who is it?" "It's me," came Dominic's voice. She opened it, relief pouring through her. "I brought food," he said, holding up a bag. "Figured you didn't eat much at the diner." Amara stepped aside, letting him in. For a moment she watched him. The way he moved, steady and sure. Not like Malik, who moved like a bomb waiting to detonate. Dominic was different. He had gravity, not chaos. "You didn't have to," she said. He shrugged. "You need strength." She opened the bag and laughed softly. "Pie again?" "It worked the first time." She smiled, genuinely this time. "You know, you're not what I expected." He raised an eyebrow. "What did you expect?" She hesitated. "I don't know. Colder, meaner. You've got that look." Dominic chuckled. "Yeah, I get that a lot." They sat, ate, spoke little. But outside, in a black SUV parked down the block, Dev watched through a camera lens. He wasn't sloppy like Malik. He was precise, surgical. He didn't care about emotion or revenge. He had one job: remove the man, leave no witnesses. Inside the motel room, Amara stirred. "You think he'll come back?" Dominic's eyes drifted toward the window. "If he does, he won't like how it ends." "How are you so calm?" she asked. Dominic took a deep breath. "Because when you've survived everything I have, fear becomes a luxury." She stared at him. "Who are you?" He met her eyes, not with pride, not with ego, but with a quiet burden. "A man who used to do terrible things for the wrong people. Now I do the right things for those who can't." Across the street, Dev loaded a silencer onto his pistol. He had the room number. He had his orders. But he didn't have a clue who he was about to walk in on. Dev moved like smoke. Quiet, calculated, and almost invisible. Room 214. He checked the silencer. Clean. Loaded. His footsteps were soundless down the motel hallway. There were no cameras here. That's why Malik had picked it. Discretion. No witnesses, no trails. One bullet. That's all it would take. He stood outside the door, raised his hand, knocked once, just to be sure. Inside, Dominic's hand paused midair over his drink. He didn't look surprised. He looked ready. Amara blinked. "Who?" "Don't open it," Dominic said sharply, already rising. Another knock, louder. Amara's breath quickened. Fear returned, sharp and fast. Dominic walked to the door and stood off to the side. "Step into the bathroom, lock the door, stay down." Amara didn't argue. Dev opened the door. Silencer raised, but he was already too late. Dominic moved like the past was chasing him, fast, fluid, and merciless. He grabbed Dev's wrist, twisted, disarmed, and slammed him into the wall before the man even processed the ambush. The pistol clattered to the ground. Dev fought back. A punch, a knee, a trained killer's reflexes. But Dominic wasn't fighting to win. He was fighting to protect. And that made him lethal. The struggle was brutal, but brief. Dominic pinned Dev with his forearm across the throat. "Who sent you?" Dev spat blood. "You already know." "Say his name." "Malik." The word came like poison. Dominic didn't flinch. "Tell him if he comes near her again. I'll end it where it started." Dev coughed. "He won't stop." "Neither will I." Dominic released him, not out of mercy, but warning. Dev stumbled out, dragging his breath like it weighed tons. In the bathroom, Amara opened the door. "You okay?" she asked, eyes wide. Dominic nodded, breathing hard. "That wasn't random, was it?" No. She walked to the window and looked out. The night felt heavier now. Realer. "So what happens now?" she whispered. Dominic picked up the pistol, checked the safety, and placed it on the nightstand. "Now, you choose again." "Choose what?" He turned to her, tired, bruised, but alive. "You can run, hide, change your number, move to a new city, or—" She stepped closer. "Or, you stay, and I'll protect you, not because you need me, but because I owe you." Amara frowned. "Owe me?" "You reminded me who I used to be, before the blood, before the names and the power and the ghosts. You gave me a reason to fight again, for someone else." Her eyes filled with tears. "I don't want to be afraid anymore." Dominic reached out, took her hand. "Then you won't be." She squeezed his hand. In that moment, the girl who had once shrunk beneath threats stood taller than she ever had, and the man who had once ruled through fear chose finally to lead through love. Somewhere across the city, Malik stared at his phone. Another failed plan. But this time the silence scared him more than the threat, because when men like Dominic go quiet, it means they're coming.